Okay, this is Chapter 6, Equations and Inequalities. This is Lesson 3, all about solving equations with rational coefficients. So we've got two old vocab where it's kind of bouncing back to revisit us in this lesson. So let's start with that vocab in a little vocab review. Those two words are rational number and coefficient. So a rational number is any number that can be written in fraction form. Right? It could be a fraction, a mixed number, a whole number, a percent, a terminating decimal, or a repeating decimal. Coefficient is the number part of a variable term, right? That was from Chapter 5. So if we put those two definitions together, we would get a rational coefficient, and that's maybe a repeating decimal like this in front of an x, for example, or a fraction like 1/3 in front of the letter y. So those would be rational coefficients. Okay, let's solve some questions, solve some problems that have questions like that. Question number 1, we're going to solve it, we're going to check it. First one here is -1 2/10 m equals -84. I'm going to drop my train tracks into place. Okay, so focus my attention to the variable side. The variable side's right here. I want to get that variable all by itself. So I see the number is -1 2/10. The operation is multiplication, right? Because a number next to a variable needs to multiply. So the inverse of multiplication is division. I'm going to be dividing both sides by the same number to isolate that variable. So what will I be dividing by? Well, the number in front of that variable is -1 2/10. So I have to divide by -1 2/10. Both sides keep it balanced. I'm just going to stop for a second. Don't forget that negative sign. If you forget the negative sign, you're actually going to leave that negative here with the variable, and it's not truly isolated, so you will have a mistake. So what you need to do is include it in your division. Okay, very, very important. All right, so -1 2/10 divided by -1 2/10 leaves me with a 1. So that's 1m. I'm going to write it like this, all by itself, isolated right over there. Now, a negative divided by a negative is a positive. 84 divided by 1 2/10. Well, I know I'm going to get a positive answer, so I'm just going to do some really quick division right here. 84 divided by 1 2/10. I'm going to take my decimal and I'm going to move it to the end and move my decimal inside the house and add a 0. And when I do that, I now have 840 divided by 12. Okay, so does 12 go into 8? No, it does not. I'll put a placeholder 0 there. Does 12 go into 84? Yes. How many times? 7. 7 times 12 is 84. And I subtract and get a 0. Don't forget about this guy. You have to bring that next 0 down. Does 12 go into 0? No, it does not. So we have to put a 0 up here in my quotient. 0 times 12 is 0, and I subtract and get a 0 remainder. A lot of 7th graders make a boo-boo and they would leave 7 as the final answer, but you have to use all the numbers inside the house. Okay, so I get 70, and 70 comes right here in my solution. Now remember, a negative divided by a negative is a positive. That's why I didn't have to put anything in front of that 70. Okay, so my solution here is m equals 70. I would like to do a really quick check to make sure that that is correct. Remember, when you check your solution, you take it and you substitute it into the original equation. So I'm going to put that 70 in parentheses in for m. So a negative times a positive is a negative. 1 2/10 times 70. Let's do that here in the margin. Okay. I have one number after the decimal, so I put a 1 here. 0 times 2 is 0. 0 times 1 is 0, so I can clear that out there. Put my placeholder 0. 7 times 2 is 14. 7 times 1 is 7, plus 1 is 8. Add them up, and I get 840. Don't forget, we have a decimal place value up here in my box, so bring that decimal into the answer. So I get -84. That's great. We can bring down the -84 from the other side, and our check worked out. If the check works out, we are happy. And then we can confidently say that our solution is correct. M equals 70 is the correct solution to that problem. All right, let's see the second one, last problem of the day. Another rational coefficient. This time our rational coefficient is a fraction. That fraction is 2/3. So I've got 2/3 b equals negative 24. Now a lot of 7th graders see this problem and they get psyched out right away. I'm going to tell you something, guys. We set the stage in chapter 0, dividing fractions in such a nice way that it's going to work super, 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 super well in problems like this. No extra work, nothing crazy here, okay? So take a look at the variable side. I've got 2/3 b. So the number we have to get rid of is this 2/3. The operation that's happening, this is 2/3 b. Well, a number next to a variable is multiplication, so we need to use division to get rid of that fraction. So we're going to divide both sides by 2/3. Now, did you take notice? I left a gap here underneath that negative 24. Yeah, that was on purpose, guys. That was to give us space to put our 1, because you remember from chapter 0 that you need a fraction in the numerator and a fraction in the denominator before you can do these complex fractions. And oh yeah, these complex fractions are coming back with a vengeance. Really quickly, 2/3 divided by 2/3 is 1, so we're left with 1b, which is what we want. We want that b to be isolated. A negative divided by a positive is a negative. So I'm going to put my negative in that answer right away. Now I don't have to pay attention to this negative anymore, okay? Put it right in my answer. Now I can do the complex fraction division. Outers first, 24 times 3 is 72. Inners next, 1 times 2 is 2. And 72 divided by 2 is 36. Take that 36, put it down in your solution after the negative sign. Remember, one more time, I knew this was a negative, I knew this was a positive. Negative divided by a positive gets me a negative answer. Once I set that negative sign there, I can forget about it, and I can just do the complex fraction division. Okay, let's do the check. Still have to check these, guys. I know that you think that's an extra step, but it is a worthwhile extra step, I promise you. So the check says 2/3 times b, and b is negative 36. Watch what I'm going to do here. I'm putting my negative 36 over 1 right away. You may say to yourself, why in the world are you doing that? Well, because, guys, I want to save myself a little bit of work here. I know that negative 36 over 1 is exactly the same as negative 36, and I also know that a fraction times a whole number means I'm going to have to turn that whole number into a fraction before I can multiply anyways. So that's a little trick, a little hack that might make this a little easier for you. All right, now I've got to simplify this side. I've got a positive times a negative. That gets me a negative answer. You know me, I like to set those signs in my answer and then forget about the signs. So I'm taking a positive times a negative. That gets me a negative. Now I want to see if I can do any simplifying. So I look at the first diagonal. 2 and 1. There is nothing that I can divide out of both of those numbers that's going to make any changes. So let's look this way. 3 and 36. I'm ignoring this sign right now. This sign is not important anymore because I have it down here. 3 and 36. What can I divide out of both of those numbers? I can divide them both by 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1. 36 divided by 3 is 12. Nice. Now I can multiply straight across. 2 times 12 is 24. 1 times 1 is 1. You know me. I'm not going to write a denominator of 1. I don't need to. I got a negative 24 there. That's awesome because that's what I was looking for. Take a look. Just brought my negative 24 down from this side as well. And they are equal, which means I can be confident that I have the right answer right here. Okay? You've got several practice problems. I'd like you to do them. Don't forget your checks. That's really, really important to see for me. Go ahead and do those practice problems. Ask any questions tomorrow in class.